Question number 2. Now in this question we need to create a function which prints to the console the pairs from the given array, and then we need to find out the time complexity for created method. Now you might be interested, what is pairs from the given array? Now let's say we have an array like this. So in this array we have 4 elements. So to print out the pairs from this array, first we are taking the first element and printing out with the second element, then printing out with the third element, then printing out with the fourth element. So as you see, we are printing first with itself, then with the second element, then with the third element, then with the fourth element. Then it continues like this, because in the second stage we are taking the second element and taking it with the first element and with itself, and third element and fourth element. So it continues like this until we have finished all elements from this array. So basically what we are doing over here, we are taking elements one by one and then again looping through this array to print out the pairs with itself and with other elements over here. Now, when we run our function, it should return something like this. So the first thing that we are going to do, we are going to create our function in Java. So in Java, I'm going to declare our function like this. So here, I'm going to declare our method, which will be print pairs. So this method as a parameter will take integer array. So it's going to be like this, array. Then inside method, we will start to write our logic. Now, the first thing that we are going to do, we will loop through this array. So I will write loop like this. So for I equals 0, then it continues until the length of array.length. And in each step, we are increasing it by 1. Then inside this loop, I'm going to write another loop, because here first we are taking the first element, then looping through this array one more time and printing out the pairs. So the second loop also will be something like this. So I'll just copy it from here and paste it over here, but this time it's going to start from not I, from J. And I will change everything from here to J because we need to print out the pairs. So inside this loop, we are going to print out the pairs. So I'll call system out println. So here I'm going to first print out the element that comes from this loop. So we are printing the element from first loop, I, then plus, I will put a comma between them, and plus the second element that comes from the second loop. So we know that in the second loop the index is J. So I will access the array elements with the index of J. So I'll put instead of I over here J. Now with this we have completed our method. Now let's see if it is working correct or not. So we have a custom array over here. I'm just going to call this method for this custom array over here. So this is the array that we explained in our slide. So I will call this method for this custom array. So let's see how this is working. So if I run our code, you see that we have an error over here. So let's see what's an error over here. So basically we have missed integer, to put integer over here. This is my fault. Actually, I'm writing in many programming languages. That's why switching between them caused me to make such stupid errors over here. So I just fix it and let's run it. Now, after running, you see that the result is the way that we explained in our slides. So first it takes the first element from this array, 1, then it takes it one more time 1. So it prints out with itself, then it prints out with the second element, then the third element, then the fourth element. It continues like this until we have finished all elements. Then it takes the second element and printing out the pairs, and it continues until we have finished all elements. Now our method works the way that we want. Now we need to find out time complexity for this method. So as always, we'll start from the first line of code. So the first line of code is loop. Now we know that when we are looping through the array, and if the number of elements in the array is n, so the time complexity for this loop is on. Then we are continuing to the next line of code. So in the next line of code, we have another loop over here. So this loop also takes on time complexity, because here also we are looping through all elements of array over here. So we have on time complexity in our outer loop, and we have on time complexity in our inner loop. Then we are continuing to the next line of code. So in the next line of code, we are just accessing the elements of the array and printing out to the console. So in this case, this will take O1 time complexity. Now, if we join these time complexities, we will get On squared time complexity, because in this case, we have to multiply these two time complexities over here. So as you remember, when we are discussing the addition versus multiplication in time complexities, we have said that if the logic is for any given this, we are doing that, then in this case we have to multiply this. So you see that for any value of this loop, we are looping through all values for this loop, then we are coming back to this. So this means that we have to multiply these time complexities over here. So if the reason is not clear for you why we are multiplying this one, I advise you to go back to our previous section. In the previous section, we have a lecture called addition versus multiplication. So I advise you to watch that lecture very carefully. So in this case, the time complexity will be O(n) squared. So hopefully everything is clear about this method and the time complexity of this method. Now in the next lecture, we are going to look at another question, find out the time complexity for a given method. So see you in the next lecture.